Amara had always believed that her destiny lay beyond the dusty roads of her small Nigerian village. With stars in her eyes and dreams of Hollywood fame, she risks everything for a chance to break into the glamorous world of showbiz. But when she arrives in Los Angeles, her hopes are quickly crushed. Lured by promises of stardom, Amara places her trust in three charismatic talent hunters who see her ambition as their opportunity. Betrayed and exploited, she finds herself trapped in a nightmare far from the glitz and glamour she imagined. Struggling to rebuild her life and dreams, she faces a ticking clock, dwindling resources, and the haunting trauma of her past. Will Amara find the strength to rise above the darkness, or will the ruthless entertainment world consume her spirit for good? In a tale that explores betrayal, resilience, and the price of ambition, Dreams Shattered is a powerful story of one girl's fight to reclaim her dreams against all odds. Based on a true story. Before we dive into this powerful story, let us know where you're tuning in from, and if you find it compelling, don't forget to hit subscribe. The plane touched down at Los Angeles International Airport, and Amara's heart raced as she looked out the window. The sprawling city seemed to stretch endlessly beneath the bright California sun, a sea of glimmering skyscrapers and palm trees. She had finally made it. Hollywood was no longer just a distant dream, it was right in front of her. Stepping off the plane, Amara was hit by a rush of cool air. Everything around her was loud, fast-paced, and dazzlingly bright. She clutched her worn suitcase to her chest, trying to steady her nerves. The airport was teeming with people speaking languages she didn't understand, dressed in clothes she could never afford. She had never felt so out of place in her life. Amara reached for her phone and quickly dialed the number of Mr. Kingsley, the talent scout who had promised to meet her at the airport. Her fingers trembled slightly as she held the phone to her ear, praying he would answer. "Amara, you made it," came Mr. Kingsley's voice, smooth and confident. "I'm just outside arrivals. You can't miss me." Relief washed over her. She hurried through the crowds, pushing past travelers with suitcases far fancier than her own. As she stepped outside, the blinding sunlight made her squint. She scanned the sea of unfamiliar faces until she spotted a tall man in a sleek suit, holding a sign with her name on it. "Welcome to LA, Amara." Mr. Kingsley greeted her with a broad smile. He was exactly as he appeared in the photos he had sent her, handsome, well-dressed, and exuding an air of authority. "How was your flight?" "It was amazing," Amara replied, though in truth, her nerves had kept her from enjoying it. She couldn't believe she was really here. Mr. Kingsley gave her a warm smile and took her suitcase, leading her toward a shiny black car parked at the curb. "We've got a lot to do, but don't worry," he said reassuringly as he opened the door for her. "You're in good hands." As the car sped through the city streets, Amara's eyes were wide with wonder. She gazed out at the towering billboards advertising the latest movies, the bustling streets lined with chic cafes, and the glittering storefronts that seemed to beckon her into a world of glamour and fame. "Isn't it everything you imagined?" Mr. Kingsley asked, noticing her wide-eyed fascination. "It's even more beautiful," Amara replied breathlessly. "I can't believe I'm really here." Mr. Kingsley chuckled. "This is just the beginning, Amara. We're going to make you a star. But first, let's get you settled." The car pulled up to a sleek, modern apartment building in the heart of the city. Amara could hardly believe her eyes as they entered the lobby with its marble floors and elegant chandeliers. She had never seen such luxury in her life. Mr. Kingsley led her up to the 5th floor, where he unlocked a door to reveal a spacious apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a stunning view of the city's skyline. "This is your place for now," he said, placing her suitcase by the door. "It's all taken care of. You'll be staying here until you're on your feet." Amara turned to him, her eyes wide with gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you, Mr. Kingsley. This is more than I ever imagined." "Call me Kingsley," he said with a wink. "We're going to be spending a lot of time together, after all. And you can thank me by working hard and making the most of this opportunity. You have the talent. Now it's time to show the world." Amara nodded eagerly. I won't let you down. Over the next few days, Kingsley, along with his two associates, Jackson and Leo, introduced Amara to a whirlwind of parties, networking events, and glamorous gatherings. She was constantly surrounded by beautiful people, flashing cameras, and luxurious settings. It was everything she had dreamed of and more. Yet, beneath her excitement, there was a flicker of unease. The three men were always close by, keeping a watchful eye on her. They were charming, attentive, and always seemed to know what she needed before she even asked. But there was something in the way they looked at her that made her feel exposed, like a prized possession rather than a person. One evening, Kingsley took her to an exclusive party at a lavish mansion in the Hollywood Hills. The air was filled with laughter, the clinking of champagne glasses, and the sound of a live band playing jazzy tunes. Amara wore a borrowed designer dress that hugged her figure, feeling both exhilarated and out of her depth. "Tonight's the night," Kingsley whispered to her as they entered the grand hall. "I've lined up some big names for you to meet. This could be your big break." Amara's heart pounded with a mix of excitement and nerves. She followed Kingsley through the crowd, trying to remember all the advice he had given her about making a good impression. As the night wore on, Amara found herself surrounded by producers, directors, and actors she had only ever seen on the big screen. The champagne flowed freely, and she could hardly keep up with all the introductions. But as the hours passed, her head began to spin, and she felt a strange dizziness she couldn't shake off. She turned to Jackson, who handed her another glass of champagne with a charming smile. "Here, drink up. You need to loosen up a bit, darling." Amara hesitated, but Jackson's encouragement and the eager eyes watching her from every corner made it hard to refuse. She took a sip, hoping it would calm her nerves. Instead, her vision began to blur, and the room started to tilt. I don't feel so well," she mumbled, clutching the edge of a nearby table. Kingsley appeared beside her almost instantly, his arm around her waist. "You've had a bit too much, darling. Let's get you somewhere quiet to rest," he said soothingly. Amara's vision swam as she allowed Kingsley to guide her through the maze of rooms. She could barely keep her eyes open, her body feeling heavy and unresponsive. A sudden wave of panic washed over her, but she was too disoriented to resist. "You're in good hands," she heard Kingsley murmur as the darkness swallowed her whole. The world was a blur of gold and silver lights as Amara struggled to keep her eyes open. She vaguely registered the muffled sound of laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the pulsing beat of music that seemed to thump in time with her erratic heartbeat. But everything felt distant, as if she were floating somewhere outside her own body. She tried to speak, but her mouth wouldn't cooperate. Her limbs were heavy, unresponsive, as though weighed down by invisible chains. A cold sense of dread washed over her, but she was too disoriented to understand why. The last thing she could clearly remember was drinking the champagne Jackson had given her. Then everything went dark. As her mind drifted in and out of consciousness, she felt hands, rough, unfamiliar hands, grabbing her, lifting her, guiding her somewhere. Panic surged through her foggy mind, but her body refused to obey her desperate plea to move, to scream, to run. "Relax, sweetheart," she heard a voice murmur in her ear. It was smooth, familiar, Kingsley's voice, but there was a sinister edge to it now that sent chills down her spine. The next thing she knew, she was lying on something soft, perhaps a bed, though her head spun too wildly to confirm. The room was dimly lit, casting long shadows on the walls that seemed to dance and stretch like sinister phantoms. She could make out the silhouettes of multiple men gathered around her, their faces obscured, their eyes gleaming with something dark and predatory. "No, please." Amara tried to speak, but the words came out as nothing more than a weak whimper. Her vision blurred as she tried to focus, but all she could see were the outlines of men, Kingsley, Jackson, Leo, and several others she couldn't recognize, standing over her. One of the men leaned in closer, his breath hot and foul against her cheek. "You're going to be a star tonight," he said with a low chuckle that sent a wave of nausea through her already spinning head. Amara's mind screamed, but her body remained limp, paralyzed by whatever they had slipped into her drink. The sensation of hands, many hands, roving over her body filled her with a terror she had never known. She was trapped, completely at their mercy, and she could do nothing to stop what was happening. She felt herself being held down, unable to resist as they tore at her clothes, their laughter growing louder, more mocking. Tears blurred her vision, but she was powerless to stop them. All her dreams, her hopes of a better life, seemed to shatter in that horrifying moment as the reality of her situation became painfully clear. This was not the Hollywood she had dreamed of. This was a nightmare from which there was no escape. The hours that followed were a haze of pain, fear, and humiliation. Amara drifted in and out of consciousness, the world around her dissolving into a cacophony of cruel laughter and harsh whispers. The men took turns, each one more brutal than the last, their touches leaving her feeling defiled and broken. She had trusted Kingsley. She had believed in his promises of stardom, of a new life filled with opportunities. But now she was nothing more than a plaything to these men, a toy to be used and discarded. When it was finally over, they left her alone in the cold, dark room. Her body was bruised, aching, every part of her violated. But the worst pain was in her heart, the shattering of her innocence, her dreams, her very spirit. She had come to Hollywood to chase her dreams, and now those dreams lay in pieces around her like shards of broken glass. For what felt like hours, she lay there, unable to move, too numb to cry. Her mind kept replaying the horrors of the night, but she tried to block it out, focusing instead on the one thought that kept her from completely breaking. I have to survive this. I have to get out. Morning came, and the light streaming through the cracks in the curtains was harsh and unforgiving. Amara's throat was dry, her voice hoarse as she tried to call for help. But there was no one to hear her. She forced herself to sit up, wincing as pain shot through her entire body. Her clothes were torn, her skin mottled with bruises. Slowly, painfully, she dragged herself off the bed. She had to leave before Kingsley and his men returned. Stumbling, she found her way to the door, her head throbbing and her vision still blurred. When she opened it, the bright hallway light made her squint. The place was eerily silent, the remnants of the previous night's debauchery strewn about the halls. As she stumbled through the building, memories of the previous night came rushing back, each one more horrifying than the last. The hands, the laughter, the helplessness. It was a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. Finally, she made it out of the building and into the harsh morning sunlight. The world outside was oblivious to her pain. Cars honked, people rushed by, and the city continued on as if nothing had happened. Amara felt like she was on another planet, completely disconnected from the life bustling around her. She didn't know where to go or who to trust. Kingsley and his men had taken everything from her, her innocence, her dignity, her dream. She had no money, no connections, and nowhere to turn. All she had was a deep, burning rage and the resolve that somehow she would make them pay for what they had done. But first, she had to survive. She had to pick up the pieces of her shattered life and find a way to keep going. Hollywood had shown her its darkest side, but Amara was not ready to give up. She had come too far, sacrificed too much to turn back now. Not like this, she whispered to herself, her voice raw and shaky. They won't break me. She wiped the tears from her face, stood a little straighter, and took a deep breath. She would fight back, no matter the cost. This city had taken everything from her, but it would not take her spirit. Amara stumbled down the crowded sidewalk, clutching her torn dress around her as if it could shield her from the harsh world around her. The bright Los Angeles sun felt cruel, mocking her as she tried to make sense of where she was. Her whole body ached, each step sending waves of pain through her. She was exhausted, bruised, and lost in a city that had turned into a nightmare overnight. She found herself in front of a small cafe and slipped inside, her eyes darting nervously around. The warm smell of coffee and fresh pastries made her stomach churn, reminding her that she hadn't eaten in nearly a day. But she had no money, no way to even buy a cup of water. All she had were the clothes on her back, torn and dirty, and a phone with a dying battery. She ducked into the cafe's bathroom, locking the door behind her. In the dim light, she caught sight of her reflection in the cracked mirror. Her eyes were bloodshot, her face streaked with mascara and tears. Bruises dotted her neck and shoulders like dark, ugly shadows. She looked nothing like the hopeful young woman who had landed in Ella just days ago. For a moment, she let herself cry. The tears came in heavy, silent sobs that shook her entire body. But she quickly forced herself to stop, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. She didn't have time to break down. She had to figure out what to do next. Her phone buzzed, and her heart skipped a beat. She pulled it out, praying it wasn't another message from Kingsley or his men. But it was. The text flashed on her screen. "Come back to the apartment. We need to talk. We can fix this." Amara's stomach twisted. How dare he? After everything they had done to her, did they really think they could just smooth it over with pretty words and false promises? She knew better now. But she also knew she couldn't survive on the streets with no money and nowhere to go. They had stripped her of everything: her dignity, her trust, her hope. Now, they were trying to strip her of her spirit. But what choice did she have? She couldn't stay out here, alone and vulnerable. She had no friends, no allies. Reluctantly, she made her way back to the apartment, her mind racing with a plan. She would play along, pretend to believe their lies, and then find a way to escape. This time, she would be smarter. When Amara arrived at the apartment, the atmosphere was tense. Kingsley, Jackson, and Leo were waiting for her, their faces a mix of concern and irritation. The luxurious penthouse, which had once seemed like a dream, now felt like a gilded cage. "Amara," Kingsley began, his voice dripping with feigned concern. "We were worried about you. You disappeared without saying anything." Amara stood stiffly by the door, her eyes darting between the three men. She could see the thinly veiled threat in their eyes, despite their attempts to appear caring. "I needed some air," she muttered, her voice shaky but defiant. She knew they were trying to manipulate her, but she refused to let them see her fear. Jackson stepped forward, holding out a glass of water. "You've been through a lot," he said in a soothing tone that made her skin crawl. "Let's just talk, okay? We can work something out." Amara's hands trembled as she took the glass, but she didn't drink. She couldn't trust anything they gave her now. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice growing stronger. "You've already taken everything from me." Kingsley's expression hardened for a moment, then softened again as he adopted a reassuring smile. "Listen, we had a misunderstanding last night. Things got out of hand. But we can fix this, Amara. We can make you a star, just like we promised." Amara's mind was racing. She could see through their lies now. They were trying to reel her back in, to keep her under their control. She knew they wouldn't let her leave so easily, not after what they had done. But if she played along, maybe she could buy herself some time. "Fine," she said, forcing herself to sound defeated. "I'll stay, but I need some time to think." The men exchanged glances, clearly relieved that she wasn't trying to run. "That's the spirit," Leo said with a grin. "You've got a bright future ahead of you, Amara. Don't throw it away." Amara nodded stiffly, her mind working furiously. She needed a plan, a way out. But first, she needed to gather her strength and resources. She couldn't afford to make another mistake. Over the next few days, Amara played her part perfectly. She acted like she was willing to forgive them, pretending to trust their promises of stardom. But every night, she lay awake, planning her escape. She knew she couldn't keep this up for long. The men were always watching her, their eyes filled with suspicion. She could feel their grip tightening around her, like a noose slowly choking the life out of her. But she was determined not to break. She couldn't let them win. She had already lost so much, but she still had her resolve. They had taken her body, her dreams, her trust, but they would not take her spirit. One night, while the men were distracted with their endless parties, Amara managed to sneak into Kingsley's office. Her hands shook as she rifled through his drawers, searching for anything that could help her: money, a phone number, a contact she could trust. Her heart nearly stopped when she found a hidden folder filled with photos of her, some taken without her knowledge. Among the photos were documents, her passport, copies of her visa, and contracts that bound her to the men. They had planned everything from the start. She was nothing more than a pawn in their twisted game. She was about to put the documents back when she heard footsteps approaching. Panic surged through her, but she quickly grabbed a few of the papers, stuffing them into her dress before slipping out of the office just as Jackson appeared in the doorway. "What are you doing in here?" he asked, suspicion flaring in his eyes. "Just looking for a pen," she stammered, trying to keep her voice steady. Jackson narrowed his eyes, but said nothing more, stepping aside to let her pass. Amara's heart pounded as she hurried back to her room. She had to get out of there soon. As she locked the door behind her, Amara pulled out the documents she had taken. Her hands trembled as she read through them, her mind reeling with anger and fear. But there, among the pages, she found something that gave her a glimmer of hope, a phone number for a woman named Sophia, listed as a casting agent. Amara didn't know if she could trust this new lead, but she had no other options. It was her only chance. Clutching the paper in her hand, she whispered to herself, "I will survive this. I will escape." But deep down, she knew the clock was ticking. If she didn't act soon, the men would tighten their grip, and she would lose any chance she had to break free. Amara sat on the edge of the bed, clutching the crumpled piece of paper with the phone number she had found. The name Sophia stared back at her like a lifeline in an ocean of despair. She had no idea if this woman could be trusted, but she knew one thing for sure: staying here with Kingsley, Jackson, and Leo was not an option. If she didn't act soon, she would be trapped forever. She glanced nervously at the door, listening for any signs of movement outside. The men were out for the evening, attending yet another high-profile party. It was the only time she could make a call without being overheard. Her hands trembled as she dialed the number, praying it wouldn't betray her with a loud ring. The phone rang once, twice, and then a woman's voice answered, soft and professional. "Sophia speaking." Amara's throat tightened, fear and hope battling within her. Hi. My name is Amara," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I was given your number. I need help." There was a brief pause on the other end. "Amara, where did you get this number?" Sophia's tone was cautious, as if she were already suspecting something was off. Amara's heart pounded as she chose her words carefully. "I found it among some papers. I'm in trouble. Kingsley and his associates, they're holding me against my will." Sophia's voice softened. "Listen to me carefully, Amara. You need to get somewhere safe. I can't talk for long. Text me your location, and I'll see what I can do." Before Amara could respond, the line went dead. Panic flared within her, but she quickly sent a text with the address of the apartment. This was her one shot, and she had to make it count. The next few days were agonizing. Amara tried to act normal, pretending to believe Kingsley's lies as she continued to secretly plan her escape. The tension in the apartment was thick, and she could feel the men's eyes on her, watching her every move. They seemed to sense that she was up to something, and their mood had grown increasingly hostile. Every time Jackson or Leo entered her room unannounced, her heart would leap into her throat. She couldn't afford to slip up now. Sophia had said she would help, but there had been no response to her text. The silence was deafening, and Amara's paranoia grew with each passing hour. What if Sophia was working with them? What if this was all another cruel game? But Amara refused to give in to despair. She had to believe that help was coming. She had survived the worst they could do to her, and she wasn't about to let them win. On the third day, Kingsley burst into her room, his usually smooth demeanor replaced with a cold, furious expression. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low and threatening. Amara's heart skipped a beat, but she forced herself to remain calm. "What's going on?" she asked, feigning innocence. Kingsley slammed a piece of paper onto the desk in front of her. It was the text she had sent to Sophia, printed out for her to see. "You really thought you could outsmart us, huh?" he hissed, his eyes dark with fury. Amara's blood ran cold. They had intercepted her message. She was caught, and now they knew she had tried to betray them. For a moment, fear paralyzed her, but then something inside her snapped. She had come too far to give up now. "I'm done being your puppet," she said, her voice shaking but defiant. "You can't keep me here forever." Kingsley laughed, a cold, heartless sound. "You think you have a choice? You belong to us now. The moment you stepped into our world, you signed your life away." Before she could react, Jackson and Leo entered the room, flanking Kingsley like loyal henchmen. Leo grabbed her by the arm, his grip bruisingly tight. "We've been too soft on you," he growled. "It's time you learn what happens to those who don't play by our rules." Amara struggled against them, but it was no use. They were too strong, and she was too weak from the days of fear and sleepless nights. As they dragged her toward the back of the apartment, a new wave of panic set in. She didn't know where they were taking her, but she knew it couldn't be good. Just as they reached a locked room at the end of the hallway, the sound of pounding on the apartment door echoed through the space. Kingsley froze, signaling Jackson to check it out. There was a tense moment of silence, then voices raised, angry, demanding. Amara's heart leapt with hope. Could it be Sophia? Had she actually come through? Leo shoved her into the locked room, slamming the door behind her. In the darkness, she could hear the muffled sound of a struggle outside. Her pulse raced as she pressed her ear to the door, straining to make out what was happening. "Open up. We have a warrant." A voice shouted from the hallway. Amara's knees nearly buckled with relief. Someone had come for her. But her relief was short-lived as she realized Kingsley, Jackson, and Leo wouldn't go down without a fight. The men were shouting, and the sound of furniture being overturned sent chills down her spine. Amara's instincts kicked in. She had to get out now while they were distracted. She felt her way around the dark room, her fingers brushing against cold, metallic surfaces. She found a small window near the ceiling, just big enough for her to squeeze through. Using all her strength, she pushed herself up and out of the window, the jagged edges cutting into her hands. She landed hard on the ground outside, gasping for breath, but she didn't stop. She ran, her heart pounding, her feet slapping against the pavement as she fled into the night. As she stumbled down the dark alley, her phone buzzed again. It was a message from Sophia. "I'm parked 2 blocks away. Hurry!" With adrenaline surging through her veins, Amara pushed herself to run faster. She turned the corner and spotted a black SUV with its engine running. The door swung open and Sophia leaned out, beckoning her inside. Amara threw herself into the car, slamming the door behind her. "Go, go, go," she screamed, her voice raw with fear. Sophia hit the gas, and the car sped away just as the sounds of sirens filled the air behind them. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Amara allowed herself to breathe. She was free, at least for now. "Thank you," she gasped, tears streaming down her face. I thought they had me." Sophia glanced at her, her expression grim but determined. "You're safe for now, Amara. But this isn't over. Those men won't stop until they have you back." Amara nodded, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. She was exhausted, battered, but she was alive. And now she had someone on her side. She didn't know what lay ahead, but she knew one thing: she would fight with everything she had to never fall into Kingsley's clutches again. The black SUV sped through the city streets, the night blurring into streaks of neon lights and dark shadows outside the window. Amara sat huddled in the back seat, her breath coming in short gasps as she tried to process everything that had happened. Her hands were still shaking, her body aching from the adrenaline rush. She was free, at least for the moment, but the fear that Kingsley and his men would somehow catch up to her was like a shadow pressing down on her chest. Sophia glanced at her through the rearview mirror, her eyes filled with a mixture of concern and determination. "We're almost there," she said, her voice steady. "I know a place where you can lay low for a while. It's safe." Amara nodded, though she wasn't sure she could trust anyone anymore. But what choice did she have? She had nowhere else to turn, and Sophia had risked her safety to pull her out of that apartment. For now, that was enough. They drove for what felt like hours, weaving through the darkened streets of Los Angeles. The city that had once seemed so full of promise now felt like a labyrinth of danger. Every passing car, every shadowy figure on the sidewalk sent a jolt of fear through Amara. She kept glancing behind them, half expecting to see Kingsley's car tailing them. Finally, they pulled into a quiet neighborhood far removed from the bright lights of Hollywood. The streets were lined with modest houses and leafy trees, a stark contrast to the glamorous chaos of the city. Sophia parked in front of a small, nondescript house with a high fence and thick curtains drawn over the windows. "Here we are," Sophia said as she turned off the engine. "Let's get you inside." Amara hesitated, her fingers gripping the door handle. "How do I know I can trust you?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. Sophia turned to face her, her expression softening. "You don't," she admitted. "But I promise you, I'm not like them. I know what Kingsley and his men are capable of, and I want to help you. I've seen too many girls get caught in their web and never get out." Amara searched Sophia's eyes for any hint of deceit, but found only sincerity. With a deep breath, she nodded and followed her out of the car. The air was cool and smelled faintly of jasmine, a welcome change from the suffocating atmosphere of the apartment she had escaped from. Inside, the house was small but cozy, with soft lighting and a faint scent of lavender. Sophia led her to the living room, where a blanket and a glass of water were waiting on the coffee table. "Sit down," she said gently. "You've been through a lot." Amara sank into the plush sofa, her body sagging with exhaustion. She hadn't realized just how tired she was until she stopped moving. The adrenaline that had kept her going for the past few days was finally wearing off, leaving her drained. "Here," Sophia said, handing her the glass of water. "You're safe now." Safe. The word felt foreign to Amara after everything she had been through. She sipped the water slowly, her throat still raw from crying. "Thank you," she whispered, looking up at Sophia. "I don't know why you're helping me, but thank you." Sophia sat down across from her, her expression serious. "I used to work with Kingsley," she admitted quietly. "I saw how he manipulated girls, how he used them and discarded them when he was done. I left when I realized how deep his connections ran. But I couldn't save everyone. I'm trying to make up for that now." Amara's eyes widened in shock. "You worked with him? How can I trust you then?" "I understand your fear," Sophia said softly. "But I'm not your enemy. I left that world behind because I couldn't stand what they were doing. I've been trying to help girls like you ever since." She paused, her voice trembling slightly. "I know I can't erase what happened to you, but I can help you start over. You deserve that chance." Amara listened, her heart torn between suspicion and the desperate need to believe in someone, anyone. Could Sophia truly be the ally she seemed to be, or was this just another trap? But the exhaustion, the hunger, the sheer loneliness made her want to trust. For now, she decided to take the risk. Over the next few days, Sophia kept her word. She provided Amara with a change of clothes, some basic toiletries, and most importantly, a sense of stability that Amara hadn't felt in months. Amara stayed hidden in the small house, constantly checking the windows and jumping at every noise. But each time, Sophia reassured her that she was safe here. Slowly, Amara began to open up, sharing fragments of her ordeal. The late nights, the endless parties, the betrayal. She spoke of the dreams she had, now tainted by the horrors she had experienced. Sophia listened without judgment, her eyes filled with compassion. "You're stronger than you think," Sophia told her one evening as they sat together in the dimly lit living room. "What they did to you is unforgivable, but it doesn't define you. You can still have the future you dreamed of." Amara shook her head, tears filling her eyes. "How?" "I'm broken. My name is ruined, my reputation. They've made sure no one will ever hire me." Sophia leaned forward, her gaze intense. "Not if we expose them. Kingsley, Jackson, Leo, they've been getting away with this for too long. But we need evidence, something concrete that will bring them down. You've already taken the first step by escaping. Now it's time to fight back." Amara's heart raced. The idea of confronting her tormentors terrified her, but the thought of letting them continue to prey on other girls was worse. "What can I do?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. "I have contacts," Sophia explained. "People who can help, but we need proof, something that ties them to their crimes. I've been gathering information, but I need someone who can get close enough to expose them." Amara hesitated. She had barely managed to escape with her life. Going back into that world felt like stepping into a lion's den. But as she thought of all the girls who might suffer the same fate, a spark of determination ignited in her chest. "I'll do it," she said finally, her voice steady. "I'll help you bring them down." Sophia smiled, a glint of admiration in her eyes. "I knew you were brave. But remember, this won't be easy. They're powerful, and they won't go down without a fight." "I know," Amara replied, a fierce resolve burning in her eyes. "But I have nothing left to lose." That night, as Amara lay on the small bed Sophia had set up for her, she couldn't help but feel a sense of hope. For the first time in a long while, she had a purpose. She wasn't just running anymore, she was fighting back. Kingsley, Jackson, and Leo had taken everything from her, but she was going to make them pay. With Sophia's help, she would expose them for who they truly were. And maybe, just maybe, she could reclaim the dreams they had stolen from her. The path ahead was dangerous, but Amara was done being a victim. It was time to take control of her own destiny. The morning sun filtered through the curtains, casting a soft glow over the small bedroom where Amara lay awake. It had been a week since Sophia had taken her in, and while Amara was grateful, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Despite Sophia's kindness, a small voice in the back of Amara's mind kept whispering warnings, remnants of her trauma from Kingsley, Jackson, and Leo's betrayals. Still, she pushed those doubts aside. Sophia had been nothing but supportive, helping her find her footing again. Amara had even managed to get some sleep, the first real rest she'd had since she'd escaped that hellish apartment. Now, she had a new purpose. She was going to expose the men who had shattered her dreams and preyed on others like her. As she stepped into the kitchen, she found Sophia on the phone, speaking in hushed tones. Amara hesitated in the doorway, straining to catch bits of the conversation. "No, she doesn't suspect anything. Yes, I have her trust. I'll bring her to the meeting." Amara's heart skipped a beat. Was Sophia talking about her? She quickly stepped back, her pulse quickening. Sophia ended the call just as Amara re-entered the room, forcing a smile onto her face. "Good morning, Amara." "I was just making some breakfast," Sophia said, her voice warm and cheerful. Amara forced herself to smile back, her mind racing. "Morning," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. She had to play along, at least until she could figure out what was really going on. If Sophia was setting her up, she needed to be careful. Sophia placed a plate of scrambled eggs and toast in front of her. "I've set up a meeting for you with someone I trust, a producer who's been wanting to help expose the dark side of Hollywood. He has connections and the resources to bring Kingsley and his men down." Amara's heart lifted for a moment. This could be the break she needed. But the lingering doubts in her mind wouldn't let her fully trust Sophia's words. She nodded slowly, pretending to be excited. "That's amazing! When do we meet him?" Sophia glanced at her phone. "Tonight. We have to move fast before they realize what we're planning. I'll drive you there, but we need to keep it low-key." Amara agreed, though her instincts were screaming at her to be cautious. She had fallen for Kingsley's promises before. She couldn't afford to be naive again. The hours dragged by as Amara waited for the evening to come. She went through the motions of preparing herself, choosing a simple dress that would allow her to move easily if she needed to run. Every nerve in her body was on edge, but she kept reminding herself that she had no choice. If this meeting was real, it could be her chance to finally bring Kingsley and his associates to justice. As they drove through the darkening streets of Los Angeles, Sophia kept glancing at her phone, her face illuminated by the screen's glow. "We're almost there," she said, her tone tense. "The meeting point is in a quiet part of town to avoid drawing attention." Amara nodded, forcing herself to stay calm. She had memorized the streets they were driving through, noting landmarks in case she needed to make a quick escape. The city lights grew sparser as they entered a more industrial part of town, with warehouses and shuttered shops lining the streets. The car came to a stop in front of an old, abandoned building. Amara's unease deepened as she looked around. The place was deserted, with only the distant hum of traffic breaking the silence. "Are you sure this is the right place?" Amara asked, her voice tight with anxiety. Sophia nodded, her eyes darting nervously. "Yes, he's waiting for us inside. He prefers meeting in private to avoid drawing attention." Amara's instincts screamed that something was wrong, but she forced herself to follow Sophia into the building. The air was thick with dust, the dim light from flickering overhead bulbs casting eerie shadows on the cracked walls. Sophia led the way, her heels clicking against the concrete floor, the sound echoing ominously in the empty space. As they walked deeper into the building, Amara's fear turned to dread. There was no sign of anyone waiting for them. The only sound was the faint dripping of water somewhere in the distance. Amara's heart pounded in her chest, and she stopped, grabbing Sophia's arm. "Sophia, where is he? This doesn't feel right." Sophia turned to face her, a look of guilt flashing across her face before she quickly masked it. "Amara, I'm sorry." Before Amara could react, the door behind them burst open, and Kingsley, Jackson, and Leo stormed in, their faces twisted with triumphant grins. Amara's blood ran cold as realization hit her like a freight train. No, you can't," she stammered, backing away. Kingsley chuckled darkly, stepping forward. "Oh, Amara, did you really think you could escape us? We've been watching you the whole time. You're far too valuable to let go." Amara turned to Sophia, her eyes wide with betrayal. "You set me up. You lied to me." Sophia's expression crumpled, tears streaming down her face. "I didn't have a choice, Amara. They threatened my family. I never wanted to hurt you." But her apologies meant nothing now. Amara was trapped, surrounded by the very men she had risked everything to escape. Desperation surged through her as she scanned the room for an exit, but Leo grabbed her wrist, his grip like iron. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," he hissed in her ear, his breath hot against her skin. "You're coming back with us. We're not done with you yet." Amara's fear turned to fury. She had trusted Sophia, dared to believe that someone could help her. But now she realized that in this city, everyone had their price. And hers had just been paid. With a sudden burst of strength, she stomped on Leo's foot and wrenched her wrist free, darting toward the exit. But before she could reach the door, Jackson tackled her to the ground, pinning her down. Kingsley leaned over her, his eyes glinting with cruel amusement. "You really thought you could escape your fate, didn't you? Silly girl. You belong to us now." Amara struggled, her mind racing as she tried to think of a way out. But just as despair was about to consume her, the sound of approaching sirens filled the air. Red and blue lights flashed through the dirty windows, casting the room in a surreal, chaotic glow. Kingsley's face twisted with rage. "Damn it, Sophia, you set us up," he yelled, realizing too late that she had betrayed him. Sophia's eyes were wide with terror as the door burst open and armed police officers stormed in, guns drawn. "Hands in the air. Don't move." Chaos erupted as Kingsley, Jackson, and Leo tried to make a run for it, but the officers quickly subdued them. Amara lay on the ground, gasping for breath, her mind struggling to catch up with what had just happened. Sophia rushed to her side, tears still streaming down her cheeks. "Amara, I'm so sorry. I had to gain their trust to get close enough to call the police. I knew they wouldn't believe me otherwise." Amara stared at her, too exhausted to process it all. The betrayal, the rescue, the confusion, it was all too much. But as the officers led the men away in handcuffs, she realized that for the first time in months, she was truly free. Sophia reached out to help her up, but Amara pulled away, her eyes filled with pain. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again," she said quietly. "I understand," Sophia whispered. "But I did what I had to do to stop them. Now you have a chance to start over." Amara nodded slowly, tears filling her eyes. She was free, but the scars of betrayal and trauma would take much longer to heal. And while the road ahead was uncertain, she was finally taking her first steps toward reclaiming her life. Amara sat on the hard bench in the police station, the cold fluorescent lights casting a harsh glow over everything. She hugged her knees to her chest, trying to make herself as small as possible in the bustling chaos around her. Officers moved back and forth, phones rang incessantly, and the air was thick with the scent of coffee and stale cigarettes. Her mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Relief, anger, betrayal, confusion, they all swirled inside her, making it hard to breathe. Sophia had saved her, but she had also used her as bait. Amara didn't know how to feel about it, and right now, all she wanted was to disappear. Sophia sat across from her, looking exhausted and hollowed out. She had tried to explain her actions, but Amara couldn't bring herself to listen. It felt like every time she had trusted someone in the city, it had led to another betrayal. A female officer approached them, her expression kind but firm. "Ms. Amara, we'll need your statement to proceed with pressing charges against Kingsley and the others. You're safe now, but your testimony is crucial." Amara nodded slowly, feeling the weight of the officer's words. She knew what she had to do, but it didn't make it any easier. Talking about what had happened meant reliving it, and she wasn't sure she was strong enough for that yet. But she couldn't let those men go free to prey on more girls like her. Taking a deep breath, she followed the officer into a small, windowless room where a tape recorder was set up. Sophia stayed behind, giving her a nod of encouragement, but Amara couldn't meet her eyes. She was on her own now, and maybe that was for the best. Hours later, her statement finally finished. Amara emerged from the interrogation room, drained and numb. Sophia was waiting for her, but Amara brushed past her, heading for the exit. She needed air, space, something to clear her mind. "Amara, wait," Sophia called, catching up to her just as she stepped outside into the cool night air. Amara turned, exhaustion etched into her face. "What do you want, Sophia? You got what you needed. You used me as bait to get Kingsley and his men. Now it's over." Sophia's face crumpled. "I didn't have a choice. You don't know what it was like. They were going to hurt my family if I didn't cooperate. I had to make them believe I was still on their side long enough to call the police." Amara's anger flared, but there was something in Sophia's eyes that stopped her from walking away. There was genuine regret there, a rawness that spoke of her own suffering. For a moment, Amara felt the old, familiar urge to trust, but she pushed it down. "I don't know if I can forgive you," Amara said, her voice breaking. "But thank you for saving me." Sophia nodded, her eyes shining with tears. "I understand if you never want to see me again. But before you go, I have something for you." She reached into her bag and pulled out a thick envelope. "This is from someone who wants to help you. A chance to start fresh." Amara hesitated, then slowly took the envelope. It was heavy in her hands, and when she opened it, she found a plane ticket, a new passport, and several $1,000s in cash. Her breath caught in her throat. What is this?" Sophia wiped her eyes, composing herself. "It's from someone who knows what you've been through and wants to give you a second chance. The ticket is to New York. There's someone there who can help you rebuild your career, away from all the darkness here." Amara stared at the contents, disbelief flooding through her. "Who would do this for me?" Sophia took a deep breath. "It's from Mr. Kingsley's estranged daughter, Bianca. She found out about what her father was doing and wants to make amends. She's willing to help you, no strings attached." Amara's heart skipped a beat. The name Bianca was familiar. She remembered Kingsley mentioning her in passing, usually with bitterness. Could this really be true? Or was it just another trap? Seeing the doubt in Amara's eyes, Sophia added, "Bianca's the one who tipped me off to Kingsley's location tonight. She's the reason we were able to catch them. She wants to help, Amara. She feels responsible for not stopping her father sooner." Amara's mind was spinning. The ticket to New York, the money, it all felt too good to be true. But what did she have to lose at this point? She couldn't stay in Los Angeles. The city had devoured her dreams and spit her out broken and bruised. Maybe New York could be a fresh start. What's the catch? Amara asked, her voice a mix of suspicion and exhaustion. Sophia shook her head. There is none. Bianca just wants to help. She's set you up with a contact there, someone who can guide you as you rebuild your career, away from Kingsley's influence. Amara's fingers tightened around the envelope. A chance to start over, far away from the nightmare she had just escaped. The idea was almost too overwhelming to process, but the hope it sparked was something she hadn't felt in a long time. I don't know, Amara whispered. After everything, I don't know if I can trust anyone. Sophia placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. I understand, but you deserve a chance to rebuild your life, Amara. To reclaim your dreams. You survived what they did to you, and that shows you're stronger than you think. Amara looked down at the plane ticket again. The destination, New York City, bold and clear. It was a place she had only ever seen in movies, a place where dreams were made and broken. Maybe, just maybe, it could be a place for her to heal and start anew. She took a deep breath, her decision made. I'll go, she said finally. But if this turns out to be another setup. It's not, Sophia promised. You have my word. Amara nodded, clutching the envelope to her chest like a lifeline. Then I guess this is goodbye. Sophia's eyes were filled with both sadness and relief. Good luck, Amara. I hope you find the peace you're looking for. With that, Amara turned and walked away, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. She didn't look back. She couldn't afford to. She had been given a second chance, and she was determined not to waste it. The airplane's wheels touched down with a soft jolt, and Amara's heart skipped a beat. The announcement over the speakers welcomed passengers to New York City, and she couldn't help but let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. She had made it. The city of endless possibilities stretched out before her, a new horizon after months of darkness. Clutching the envelope Sophia had given her, Amara stepped off the plane and into the bustling terminal. The energy of the city was palpable, electric. People hurried by, their faces set with purpose. For the first time in what felt like forever, Amara felt a glimmer of hope stir within her. She was far away from Los Angeles, far away from Kingsley and his men, and maybe, just maybe, she could finally start over. The instructions Sophia had given her were clear. Bianca, Kingsley's estranged daughter, had arranged for someone to meet her at the airport. Amara scanned the crowd, her nerves fraying as she searched for a familiar face. It was only when a woman in a sleek black coat and red lipstick approached her that Amara's anxiety eased a fraction. Amara, right? The woman asked, her voice smooth and confident. I'm Claire. Bianca sent me. I'm here to take you to your new place. Amara nodded cautiously, still wary despite the relief washing over her. How do I know you're really here to help me? She asked, the trauma of past betrayals making her cautious. Claire smiled gently. I get it. Trust doesn't come easy after what you've been through. But I promise you, I'm not like the people who hurt you. I'm just here to help. Let's get you settled and we can talk more. Amara studied her for a moment longer, then nodded. Okay, let's go. The drive through New York was both exhilarating and overwhelming. The city was alive with lights, noise, and energy so different from the oppressive darkness of her recent past. Claire drove them through Manhattan, pointing out landmarks as they went, but Amara could hardly focus. All she could think about was what lay ahead. Eventually, they pulled up to a modest apartment building on the Upper West Side. It was far from the glitz and glamour of Hollywood, but it was safe, clean, and, most importantly, hers. Claire led her up to the third floor, where she unlocked the door to a small but cozy one-bedroom apartment. This is your place now, Claire said, handing Amara the keys. Bianca's covering the rent for the first few months to give you time to get back on your feet. There's food in the fridge, and she's arranged for you to meet with a few industry contacts who can help you rebuild your career on your terms this time. Amara stepped inside, her eyes filling with tears. It was the first time she had felt safe in months. The apartment was simple, with a small living room, a tiny kitchen, and a bedroom with a bed neatly made up. She turned to Claire, her voice choked with gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you. Or Bianca." Claire smiled. "You've been through hell, Amara. You deserve a fresh start. Take it one day at a time." Over the next few weeks, Amara slowly began to rebuild her life. With the help of Bianca's contacts, she managed to book a few small modeling gigs, and soon she found herself meeting people in the industry who were genuinely interested in her talent, not just her looks. The scars of her past were still there, but every step forward made them hurt a little less. One of Bianca's contacts, a producer named Daniel, took a particular interest in Amara's story. He was working on a new independent film project and wanted her to audition for a role that was not just about looks, but about raw, emotional storytelling. It was a chance for Amara to prove herself not as a pretty face, but as an actress with depth. On the day of the audition, Amara stood in front of the camera, her hands shaking slightly as she read her lines. But as she poured her heart into the scene, she let herself draw from the pain, fear, and betrayal she had endured. The emotions were raw and real, and by the time she finished, there were tears in her eyes. Daniel was stunned. "That was incredible, Amara," he said, his voice filled with awe. "You brought something to that role no one else could. We'd be honored to have you." Amara could hardly believe it. For so long, she had felt like a shadow of herself, broken and used. But now, she had a chance to reclaim her dreams, to show the world what she was capable of. A few weeks later, Amara found herself on set, surrounded by cameras, crew members, and fellow actors. It was a far cry from the world she had known in Los Angeles, where everything had been tainted by false promises and hidden agendas. Here, she was respected for her talent, not exploited for her naivety. The film was a small indie project, but it had heart. Amara poured everything she had into her role, using her pain and experiences to bring the character to life. It was cathartic, a way to channel her trauma into something beautiful. As the filming wrapped, Daniel pulled her aside. "Amara, I have no doubt this film is going to make waves. Your performance is going to get noticed. You have a gift, and the world is finally going to see it." Amara's eyes filled with tears, but this time, they were tears of joy. For the first time in what felt like forever, she was proud of herself. She had been broken, betrayed, and nearly destroyed, but she had survived. She had risen from the ashes of her old life, stronger and more determined than ever. On the night of the film's premiere, Amara walked the red carpet, the flash of cameras and the murmur of the crowd washing over her like a dream. She wore a simple but elegant dress, her head held high. This time, the lights didn't blind her. She was no longer the naive girl who had been lured into Hollywood's darkest corners. She was a survivor, and tonight was her night. As she stood in front of the crowd, reporters shouting questions at her, Amara took a deep breath and smiled. "This film," she said into the microphone, "is not just a story, it's a message. A message that no matter how many times you get knocked down, you can rise again." The crowd erupted in applause, and for the first time, Amara felt truly free. She had found her voice, and she wasn't afraid to use it. Amara's journey was far from over, but she knew now that she had the strength to face whatever came next. She had lost everything, but she had found herself in the process. And as she walked into the theater, ready to watch the film that would change her life, she knew that her story was just beginning. The applause from the premiere still echoed in Amara's mind as she sat alone in her new apartment. It was a modest space, but it was hers, paid for with her own earnings, her own hard work. The film's release had been a small triumph, bringing her name back into the spotlight, but this time on her terms. The critical acclaim for her performance had given her something even more valuable than fame. It had given her power, a voice. But as the cheers and congratulations faded, Amara knew that her journey wasn't truly over. The men who had shattered her life still roamed free. Kingsley, Jackson, Leo, their names were etched into her mind, their actions a scar that would never fully fade. She had escaped their grasp, but they continued to prey on other vulnerable young women, their network of exploitation intact. Amara couldn't rest until they were brought to justice. She had risen from the ashes of her past, and now it was time to finish what she had started. The next morning, Amara sat in a small, nondescript office across from Daniel, the producer who had taken a chance on her for his film. His expression was serious as he listened to her plan, his fingers steepled in front of him. "You're sure about this?" he asked, concern etched on his face. "Going after Kingsley and his men is dangerous, especially now that you're starting to rebuild your career." Amara nodded, her eyes burning with determination. "I have to do this, Daniel. They can't keep getting away with this. I won't let them destroy any more lives." Daniel leaned back, letting out a sigh. "All right, I'll help you. But we need to do this the right way. I have connections in the media, reporters who are itching to break a story like this. If we can gather enough evidence, we can take them down publicly." Amara's heart raced with a mix of fear and hope. She had spent so long running, hiding, trying to forget. But now, she was ready to face her demons head-on. Over the next few weeks, Amara worked tirelessly with Daniel and his contacts to gather evidence. She reached out to other women who had been exploited by Kingsley and his associates, convincing them to share their stories. It wasn't easy. Many were too scared to speak out, afraid of the repercussions. But slowly, one by one, they came forward, their courage sparking a fire that couldn't be extinguished. The testimonies were heartbreaking. Each story was a painful reminder of her own ordeal, but it also fueled her resolve. She knew she was doing the right thing. This wasn't just about justice for herself, it was about protecting others from the same nightmare she had endured. One night, as Amara pored over documents and interview transcripts in her apartment, her phone buzzed with a message. It was from Bianca. "We need to talk. Urgent. I have something that can break this case wide open." Amara's pulse quickened. Bianca had been her silent ally from the start, using her resources to help expose her father's crimes. But this was the first time Bianca had directly reached out since sending her to New York. Amara agreed to meet her in a quiet cafe on the outskirts of the city. The cafe was nearly empty when Amara arrived, the soft hum of jazz music playing in the background. Bianca was seated in a corner, her face hidden behind large sunglasses. When Amara approached, Bianca stood and pulled her into a tight embrace. "I have it," Bianca whispered, sliding a thick folder across the table. "Bank records, contracts, emails. It's all here. Everything you need to bring them down." Amara's eyes widened as she flipped through the pages. It was a treasure trove of evidence, more than she could have ever hoped for. "How did you get all of this?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. Bianca's expression was grim. "I've been keeping tabs on my father's activities for years. I always suspected something, but I didn't have the courage to confront him. Not until you showed me what he was truly capable of." Tears welled up in Amara's eyes, but she blinked them away. This will change everything." Bianca nodded. "It's time, Amara. Release this to the media. Make sure the world knows what they've done." With Bianca's evidence in hand, Daniel connected Amara with Lena Ortiz, a tenacious investigative journalist who had made her career exposing corruption in Hollywood. They met in a small conference room at Daniel's studio, the air thick with anticipation. "This story is going to ruffle a lot of feathers," Lena said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Are you ready for the backlash? Once this goes public, they'll come after you with everything they've got." Amara's hands trembled slightly as she thought about the storm that was about to hit. But she straightened her shoulders and met Lena's gaze head-on. "I've been living in fear for too long. It's time the world knows the truth." Over the next few days, Lena and her team worked tirelessly to verify the evidence and corroborate the testimonies Amara had gathered. The story was set to break on one of the biggest news networks, with a special feature exposing the dark underbelly of Hollywood's predatory practices. The day the story aired, Amara watched from her apartment, her heart pounding. The screen was filled with images of Kingsley, Jackson, and Leo, followed by clips of the women whose lives they had ruined. Lena's voice narrated the horror of their actions, detailing the evidence that linked them to a network of exploitation. Amara's phone buzzed constantly with calls and messages. Some were from reporters eager for more details. Others were from strangers offering words of support. But the most satisfying call came from the police, informing her that Kingsley, Jackson, and Leo had been arrested on charges ranging from sexual assault to human trafficking. Amara sank to the floor, her body trembling with relief. She had done it. She had finally brought them to justice. The men who had taken everything from her were now behind bars, their reign of terror finally over. A few weeks later, Amara found herself back on a red carpet, this time for an award show recognizing the independent film that had reignited her career. The cameras flashed, and reporters shouted her name, but this time, the attention didn't feel suffocating. It was on her terms. As she stood there, basking in the applause, she realized that she was no longer the naive girl who had arrived in Hollywood with stars in her eyes. She had been broken, betrayed, and nearly destroyed, but she had come out stronger. She had taken control of her own narrative, using her pain to protect others and bring her abusers to justice. Standing before the crowd, Amara took the microphone, her voice clear and unwavering. "This is not just my story," she said, her eyes scanning the audience. "It's the story of every woman who's been silenced, manipulated, and exploited. Today, I stand here not as a victim, but as a survivor. And I promise you, this is only the beginning." The crowd erupted in applause, and for the first time in years, Amara felt a deep sense of peace. She had found her voice, and she was determined to use it for good. As the lights dimmed and the applause faded, Amara walked off the stage, her head held high. Her journey had been long and painful, but she had finally found her way. And now, with the world at her feet, she was ready to write the next chapter of her life.